I'm Marty Durbin, the President and CEO. I want to tell you how pleased we are to be hosting this event today. I know many of you know that this is Infrastructure Week, and while we normally, we think about infrastructure, we're hearing about roads and bridges and ports and all the rest, and while that is all very important part of the debate, we can't forget that the energy infrastructure is another very important part of the debate that's going to allow us to essentially take advantage of the economic, environmental, and energy security opportunities that our shale gas revolution have provided to us. So again, pleased that you were able to join us here today, and we're very fortunate that we would have a couple of voices in this debate join us this morning that are very critical to moving this debate forward. When we first agreed to do this a couple of months ago, again, as I said, Infrastructure Week has traditionally been about kind of surface transportation and what have you. I believe I'm right in saying that we're the only energy-focused Infrastructure Week event. But what's nice to see is that we thought this was going to be kind of a quiet Thursday to have a little event, but instead, what we've got instead, the Senate Energy Committee today has got a hearing on 22 different bills focused on energy infrastructure. The House Energy Committee had a hearing yesterday focused on process at FERC. Speaking of FERC, they moved their meeting from last week to today, so we've got that as well. Department of Energy is holding meetings on the Quadrennial Energy Review focused on energy infrastructure. So clearly we're at the right place at the right time to focus on the right issue here. So again, without further ado, what I want to do is invite our first guest up, who is no stranger to the issues of the economic opportunities that infrastructure development bring. We'll tell you, I'm personally privileged to have Sean McGarvey, who's president of the North America's Building Trades Unions, join us this morning. Sean represents 3 million members in 13 different trade unions, 14 trade unions. And again, we've had the privilege of working together on other big energy infrastructure issues, which I'm sure may come up this morning. But anyway, Sean, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning. If I can, Marty, just make some comments. I don't generally read from notes, but it's important that I get these facts correct. So bear with me just for a moment. As we know, in 2013, the U.S. became the world's top producer of petroleum and natural gas, surpassing Russia and Saudi Arabia. But our energy infrastructure has not kept pace. I think we all know that. And last month, as Marty mentioned, the Obama administration released its Quadrennial Energy Review, which highlighted the need to invest in our nation's energy infrastructure. One of the report's conclusions is that by 2040, Americans will still need oil and natural gas to meet more than 60% of its energy needs. But the lack of natural gas pipeline infrastructure is preventing many American communities from realizing the benefits of cheap domestic natural gas. For example, the lack of pipeline capacity in New England has forced those states to pay an additional $4 billion over the past 2 winters to produce power. Today, those pipeline constraints has pushed up the spot price for natural gas in New England to the highest in the nation. North America's building trades stand ready to work with the White House, the Department of Energy, Congress, and organizations like ANGA to achieve our nation's full energy potential. Because we know that such investments result in massive, massive job creation. Estimates are that the infrastructure improvements in just the oil and natural gas area could, over the next decade, attract as much as $1.15 trillion in new private capital investment and support 1.15 million new jobs and add $120 billion on an average year to our nation's GDP. Updating the U.S. energy infrastructure could generate an estimated $1.14 trillion in capital investments, creating both jobs and energy savings from 2014 to 2025. Investments in oil and natural gas industries, transportation, and storage infrastructure can contribute up to $120 billion to the economy every year. An investment in infrastructure that moves oil and natural gas could support as many as 1.15 million jobs on an average annual basis, including 800,000 jobs in pipeline construction alone. These are not just pie-in-the-sky numbers. We have the data that confirms what those of us in the construction industry have known for some time now. Namely, that investments in oil and natural gas development, as well as an infrastructure that supports that development, are huge jobs generators in the construction industry. Now, in the fall of 2014, a study from the University of Illinois concluded that investments in oil and natural gas development in the Marcellus Shale region have led to significant increases in construction and maintenance jobs. From 2008 To the first half of 2014, over 72 million hours of direct and indirect construction labor had been worked on construction projects related to the Marcellus Shale play, compared to 45 million hours worked on oil and gas related construction projects the previous 7 years. These hours translate to the creation of roughly 45,000 actual construction jobs. This is work that would not have occurred but for the natural gas exploration and investment in the Marcellus Shale geological footprint. And these jobs typically pay wages and fringe benefits that are way, way above average. Therefore, the economic impact of 72 million work hours created through Marcellus Shale development is about $2.7 billion. Such investments are further enabling our members, our unions, and our contractors to build ladders to the middle class. This is a really important point about our energy opportunities in this country as politicians and policymakers talk about both the shrinking middle class and income inequality. Through these private sector investments, we can create these ladders of opportunity, particularly through the construction industry and direct hire in the energy industry, okay, for traditionally folks that have been left behind. I'm talking about women, folks of color, and of course our veterans. Today, thanks in large part to the opportunities created by energy-related investments, we're now operating what we call apprenticeship readiness programs, which helps these communities get ready to take advantage of the opportunities in the construction industry across 75 metropolitan communities in the country. And more than a handful of them are directly related to large infrastructure plays. For instance, in the Marcellus Shale region around Shell's proposed cracker, we've started an apprenticeship readiness program to make sure the folks that live in those communities around that project have the opportunity to get into apprenticeship through our pre-apprenticeship program and take advantage of training that we give them, which will give them the skill sets that will keep that family in the middle class, not one generation, but 2 generations. Again, this is private sector capital investment in our energy future. And we can add that number up in tremendous fashion if America galvanizes a sound approach to rebuilding and modernizing America's vast array of important infrastructure, networks, and systems. Domestic energy development and production is a significant factor in fueling our regions and our nation's economic recovery. The U.S. energy boom is creating family-sustaining jobs as well as the training opportunities that lead to skill sets that last a lifetime, which are exactly the type of jobs and opportunities that we need to rebuild the great middle class. And just an interesting personal anecdote about the comments I made about the New England region and the struggles we're having to get the infrastructure in place up there. My daughter and her husband and my new grandson live in that region, and we had a first birthday party up there in January. So the whole family was up there, and my mom and dad are still with us and in good shape, so they were there, and we stayed there. And just like any young, struggling family, you know, they've got the mortgage, they've got a car payment, it's tough to get by, and increased cost for their electricity and heating their home is a big deal. So my son-in-law chops a lot of wood. He's got a wood-burning fireplace to try to offset those increased costs, which at this point in their lives, they really don't have it to pay that inflated energy bill because of the lack of energy infrastructure that's driving up cost. Now, my father's of the generation, he remembers when he was a kid where it was his job in the middle of the night to go down and throw coal on the fire to keep the heat going in his house. And after a weekend at my daughter's house, he said, "My God, what's going on here?" He says, "Why don't they just turn their heat up?" And, you know, when you explain, "Dad, it's the cost, and they just don't have it." And he said, "Well, something's wrong when a young couple with a baby have to be getting up in the middle of the night to throw logs on the fire to keep the heat at an adequate temperature in the house because they can't afford energy." Right. So that's the reality of the world we live in, and working with folks like ANGA and others to make sure that we take full advantage of the energy future that we have in this country and lift up whole communities, states, regions, and the entire country through this golden opportunity, this once in a generation or once every other generation opportunity for our natural energy resources. We're excited to be part of that team. Thanks, Marty.
You bet. Well, Sean, again, thanks again for being here. And you clearly, you and the member unions are very focused on the economic opportunities, certainly from an oil and gas production standpoint. You've been there now. As fast as this has happened, as quickly as it came on board. I mean, I know there was a interesting interaction between this industry and your members, just getting to the acknowledgement and recognition that there's a real opportunity here, and there's a win-win. And I think we've seen that play out. In fact, you've recently been quoted as saying that domestic energy, development of our nation's domestic energy resource, the single biggest contributing factor for job growth in the U.S. construction industry today. Obviously, getting to the infrastructure to take advantage of that is the next level of opportunity for for your members. One of the things we've certainly heard through debates on almost any infrastructure project out there is that when we start to talk about the job opportunities, there are those critics that like to say, yeah, but they're only temporary jobs. How do you guys view that discussion of jobs just being temporary?
Well, as you know, this is infuriating to me.
I had a feeling.
People that are ignorant through lack of education of the construction industry, I accept when they think that, these are temporary jobs, because objectively, they could look at it and say, well, a job starts and it finishes, and when the job's over, the construction portion of the work goes away. But an educated person, like policymakers and members of Congress, I don't accept that they don't understand, because, if you just look at Marcellus Shale region, right, in the comments I made, 70-some million man-hours of work. I don't think anybody quite grasped what the construction industry went through when we went through, what we called a dramatic recession in this country. In the construction industry, it was a depression. We had areas of unemployment where we had states where we had 50% of our membership out of work. We haven't recovered totally. Our unemployment in the construction industry is still twice the national average. In that region, we were able to almost maintain full employment. We kept people with roofs over their heads, their health care. We were able to keep food on their tables, all because of those private sector investments in the energy industry. It was like a sea of despair, and there were very few lifeboats, and there was one of the places where we had one, and a sizable one. And when you understand the construction industry, okay, in a man or woman's career, you can spend 30 or 40 or 45 years, okay? There's no construction project that lasts that long. But the way our economy works, the way private sector and public sector investment in infrastructure works, is you go hopefully from job to job to job. And when you think about it, and this is what I like to tell people that actually are educated, would you consider the Hoover Dam, one of the iconic New Deal construction projects, to be a temporary job? The Golden Gate Bridge. Policymakers and politicians would have tripped over themselves to be there for the ribbon cutting or the topping off ceremony for the new Freedom Tower in New York. That's technically a temporary job, but those folks with those skill sets then move from that project to the next project when we have a functioning economy and we're making the proper investments both on the private side and the public side. So I do take great issue with people who diminish a great industry and one of the bulwarks of the middle class in this country. If you want a great middle class career where you have great skill sets that'll last you and your family a lifetime, and the opportunity to go through our apprenticeship programs, and actually when you get out of your apprenticeship program, not only are you a welder, or not only are you a heavy equipment operator, not only are you an electrician, a carpenter, but in most cases you come out with associate's degree, because we're connected with community colleges, and then you have the opportunity to go on and get your bachelor's. I mean, that's our industry. When you're talking about sustaining and like we've talked before, how do you put the floor under the middle class? Well, here's one way that you can do it. We're not the biggest part of the economy, but we're a big part of the economy in the construction industry, and these are real middle class jobs that take care of families for a lifetime. So I get highly aggravated when I hear that temporary word.
Well, let me see. You touched on the training issue, and I think that's one of the challenges I think we've got with regard to just expanding infrastructure. A growing challenge has been these local opposition, let's call it. And in some cases, let's say any project, whether it's a company coming in to to produce natural gas or a new pipeline coming through, communities have legitimate concerns to raise, and that we ought to have robust opportunities for public input and what have you. I do think that there are then also those who they want to stop any project that has to do with a fossil fuel, and that's a debate to be had, but we need to see these projects move forward. So part of what I'm asking is I think part of the solution is to get more voices at the local level talking about the various benefits. And I do think that it's not just about the jobs themselves, but it's the opportunities, the building trades, and the apprenticeship programs and training, and take a moment to talk about the helmets to hard hats and the other types of programs that you're engaged in.
Well, when you actually think about it, and unfortunately, we're engaged. Quite honestly, with some groups that there's absolutely no compromise. Okay, there's no way to satisfy them. There's no way to recognize the investments in technology, safety that the industry has made. There's no way for them to recognize that if we don't want to lose our place in the world as the economic superpower, okay, we have to have this infrastructure and the ability to responsibly reap the benefits of what God has given this country and its natural resources. We're engaged in that every day. And when these folks who are passionate, I think they're off the mark. I say when we watch a Congress that battles over the dollars and cents with the federal budget that we've been struggling with for years, and you look at the cost, particularly in my lifetime, of protecting our strategic national energy interest around the world, okay? The cost in dollars for that, okay, is one thing, but the cost in blood is another. And like you mentioned, we run a program called Helmets to Hard Hats, where we take transitioning military personnel, okay, and through private sector companies' investments in construction projects, we move folks that are leaving the military into training in the construction industry and on those projects, again, where they learn those skill sets that last a lifetime. And when we have these discussions, I'd say I'd much rather deploy, the exiting men and women of our military into the middle class through the construction industry, developing the country's natural energy resources, than deploying them around the world, okay, and spending not only their blood. These folks, lots of times I'm talking to, it's not their family that's been deployed. It's not the sacrifices that their family has made. Investing in ourselves. It's time for America to invest in ourselves, and we can do it responsibly. The investments, as I said, in technology and safety. We get in arguments, over pipelines or a particular pipeline. They don't even know what they're talking about when they see the investment in R&D and technology to build the safest infrastructure, energy infrastructure in the world. They don't seem to worry that our grid is perilously, close to shutting down any day because of the lack of investment and the fight over trying to enhance the capability of our grid. You can't have a reasonable conversation. So when it comes to making sure that all the voices in the community are heard, I can tell you that the 3 million men and women that I represent are there to tell their story about how important these investments are on the private side and the public infrastructure that helps support some of the private infrastructure investments, how important these investments are to the communities, to the tax base, to the schools, to the emergency services, to the healthcare systems, everything that goes with it. And again, I think that the industry has made these investments, is willing to engage in this dialogue, has always been willing to compromise, but it's hard to compromise with a group who has a platform and a bullhorn that absolutely will not compromise 1 inch on any issue.
Let me ask you, Sean. I can personally say that the individual unions that belong to the building trades, laborers, operating engineers, pipe fitters, have been very effective and constructive in helping move these projects forward. Now, understandably and justifiably, the building trades are going to support those projects where you've got a good relationship with the company and perhaps even have a project labor agreement. But I guess I've sensed over the years that there's been an improving relationship. Yeah, even again, my time at API when with the Labor Management Committee, Pennsylvania I thought was a really interesting example where we saw an industry move in and where the relationship didn't really exist, but over time everyone kind of realized that, hey, wait a minute, this is working for all of us. So I just I guess ask for your opinion on how that has been progressing and your thoughts for how where it's going.
Well, it's really been interesting to work on building these relationships. We have so much in common as opposed to the things we disagree with. And we've gotten together and said, let's really examine these things we have in common. And then once we examined them, we said, well, how do we partner to move the issues along that we really agree with, that are in the best interest of our country and our economy. And having the opportunity to work with really smart people in really iconic, great companies that have been around for 100 years or been around for 20 years, that are interested, look, I serve a membership, okay? My job is to create economic opportunity for my membership. Sum and substance, that's what I'm supposed to do. And when you run a company, you have a board of directors and you have shareholders to answer to if you're publicly traded. But both of those things are true. But then there's this meeting in the middle. Okay, how do we create value for shareholders? How do I create value for my members and do it in a responsible way, working with partners who want to work with us responsibly to create value for their shareholders, my members, and the country. And when you have the opportunity to have those conversations, you say, gosh, there's so many things that we can do together and do better together. And I got to tell you, it's in the labor movement, it's always kind of been the way of the building trades. If you go back to, a great quote from George Meany, back when he was a plumber in New York City and a local leader, they never went on strike. They never had a strike, even during that tumultuous time down there. It's because their contractors needed to be successful for his plumbers to work. Well, it's no different for us today, some 80, 90 years later. We need to have successful relationships with our contractors in the industries in which we work. Okay, they need to be successful in order for us to have the opportunities to build and maintain the infrastructure that they're going to build for their company. So having the opportunity to starting with the great leadership at API and you and your impact on putting that together, which was very important. We've now branched out. We've just started another one with the American Chemistry Council. Okay, another big user of the country's natural resources. And I got to tell you, we're getting opportunities right now to build infrastructure in this country that for the last 30 or 40 years would have been built overseas in India and other places. We're building fertilizer plants. We're building petrochemical manufacturing facilities, and not just in a certain region of the country, all across the Midwest, across Pennsylvania. I'm a Philadelphia person, okay? And I can tell you when I talk to my friends back home, they are like so stoked that Philadelphia, the next generation of Philadelphia economy is going to be based on energy. The Energy East is what they're calling it. And the investments that are being made, fantastic. And when all the domestic, heavy manufacturing left, and we saw what just happened in Baltimore, and it's happening in cities around this country, it's about jobs for folks, and good jobs for folks, middle-class sustaining jobs. And for my hometown, man, that investment's coming back, and it's coming back because of energy. So those partnerships and working through the issues where we agree and trying to tell our story across the broadest base, reasonably and sensibly, good policymakers will make good decisions when they have all the facts.
Good. Why don't we take a few minutes? We take some questions from the audience here. I think we've got a microphone. If anyone has a question. No questions?
Oh, I like it. I wish it was like this in school.
What do you see as the key to unlocking the growth of infrastructure in the New England area? And what role do you think your organization can help play in that?
Again, I think it's communication. I think it's saturation of communication. I think that, lots of families in New England, like my daughter's young, struggling family, certainly understand it. I think that as time goes on, at some point, the general populace just says enough. This is silly, this is stupid, and you're taking bread off my table and money out of my pockets to buy the necessities of life for my family based on an argument that quite honestly doesn't have merit. So we're going to get there. The American people are very, very smart. And at some point, you know, the moneyed interest, okay, who you know, in my opinion, would have us, you know, instead of in the house having a fire, out back with a stick trying to get one started for our heat. At some point, the people are going to rise up and say that's enough. We want responsible development. We want responsible energy consumption and prices. And there's a way that has to be done, and that has to be an investment that nobody's asking the government to make that investment. Nobody's saying raise their taxes. Here's an opportunity to lower their monthly bills, okay, through some private sector investment. At some point, people are going to say, you know what, enough of that. You need to be held accountable. You need, as a policymaker, to make smart decisions. You've played with this long enough. It's time to do something for the people, and it's to get that infrastructure, you know, in the ground and around the area, so we lower those energy prices, and in turn stoke that economic engine that quite honestly hasn't fully recovered through much of New England.
Any additional questions? Okay, well, please join me in thanking Sean for being here this morning. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Okay.